Welcome to the JAMODI podcast, where we interview coaches and leaders to find out not just what they do, but how they do what they do. Becoming the best version of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. You mentioned earlier about being consistent as a leader, as a coach, in the habits that you have and the standards that you've set. Because I think a frustrating thing for players is not knowing what the expectations are or them being different from day to day. And so what are some of there's so many ways to say it, standards, expectation, non-negotiables of your program?
Well, I think, I always had this in my programs. I think that, being in public school for as long as I was, it's 9 years at Naaman and 6 years as head coach at Plano East, and being in the public school realm, I always carried my faith into that, right? And so I always wanted my players to, when I thought about, okay, what do I really want my players to be? I know I'm trying to help them with their basketball careers and to be the best basketball players they can be. But, more than anything, I want them to be great husbands and great fathers one day. And so, and be able to have a great career and job if it's not in the basketball side. So I think, those same habits that would make you successful in that realm, like we talked about, being on time, being reliable. It's not okay just to not show up or not communicate if something's going on. I think just that consistency, like we talked about earlier, and that can look, obviously being on time and showing up without, I guess, that energy level being consistent. And the book, The Energy Bus, it talks about, I like the term energy vampires, and just, you don't never want guys who come in and just suck the air out of the gym. And so I know everyone's going to have bad days from time to time, but just to be there and be consistent. And, obviously being at PCA, even right behind me, this is a little office room that we use for meetings, but pursue Christ always. And so what does that look like? Well, as teammates, that means that we're treating each other with respect. And I think a big part of that is that we're encouraging each other. We're not tearing each other down. And that doesn't just go for when we're together, but when you're at the lunchroom, when you're around your friends and you're talking to other people, you're building your teammates up. You're never tearing them down. And so if anything like that ever comes to the forefront where we know about it, we address it. And I think that's another thing, is just keep holding them to a high standard in that regard, and then addressing and confronting those things when they start to slip are really important. And so the non-negotiables, there's definitely things. Being at PCA, our kids are held to a very high standard just in the school in general, whether it be social media or the way that they are expected to behave off the court, outside of the school, in the school, but also just on the court with us. I guess respecting the game is the term I like to use. And I've always heard if the ball's loose, diving on it, doing all the little things, and just being a great teammate in the way that you respect the game, and the way that you interact with coaches, officials, not coming off the court, pulling your jersey out, not protesting with body language. Those are just some of the things I think about when I think about the culture and the things that we try to address if it ever happens, because those things are never going to build a championship program.
Yeah.
And if we allow those things to go on and not confront them, I think it's going to eventually bite us, and it's going to hurt us. And so those are some of the things that, I don't know if that's all over the place, but those are some of the things that I think are really important to us.
I think those non-negotiables, the culture you're talking about, does lead to winning and championship habits. But one thing you said it a couple times, you said address it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really key, regardless of what player it is. You know, how many times are we feel hesitant to address it, one of our better players for something that they're doing that goes against our culture, or are we more likely to hit it hard to the players that are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 on the bench? Like, we have to have that standard, or the environment where the players know our expectations, and regardless of who you are, how much playing time or what you can do on the floor, you'll be held to the same standards. Maybe difficult at the beginning, but over the long haul, it'll come back to, like, instead of biting you, I think it'll come back to help you win.
Oh yeah, and I think to just thinking about the players that do want to play at that next level, I think it's a disservice to them if we don't. They may be the best player on our team, but they may not be in college, and so we can't let them get away with things that would never be acceptable, and really help them to be successful at the next level. And those same things are going to help our team win and help our team, stay together, because those things that we just talked about tend to tear at the fabric of your unity as a group, and create a lot of animosity. And obviously the way the coach handles it, and being transparent about, and like you said, consistent no matter who it is, that's key, because everybody's watching.
Yeah.
The kids are watching, and they get it. I mean, they know when you're letting someone off the hook. So I think that consistency.
Yeah, you lose that credibility real quick,
no doubt.
when you do that. And I think too, I never want to come off of just bashing select ball or AAU ball, because there's really good coaches in that world that truly want the best for their players and do run strong programs that have non-negotiables, that have standards that are in place. But it does feel like at times, and the beauty of high school basketball to me is you're getting not just the people that, from the same environment, same city, or around the same place, but they're with each other every day, but they have different aspirations and the different backgrounds. And through that, they have to figure out a way to work together to be one unit. But for that to happen, it's what we're talking about, is everybody being held to the same standard. But if you're a player and you're coming from another program that, because you're so good, or because there were no standards, and it's hard for a player to switch it on and off. So I think it's important for coaches also to realize, or to meet the players where they're at, understand where they're coming from, and if there is a struggle for a player to get on board, it might not be that they're just a turd, that they're just a punk. It might be that this is what has been allowed, and now for their good, for their own good, and for the betterment of the team, we need them moving in this direction.
Yeah, and I think, obviously depending on where you coach and the kids that you're coaching, I mean, you may be the one person that's holding them accountable. You may be I've coached in a lot of different, schools, and, had different kids, and some with, great parents, some who didn't have much parental guidance at home. And so we've got to hold kids accountable. I mean, that's our job. And that's, if we love them and care about them, it's just like my own kids. I mean, if I'm not holding them accountable and trying to help them to act the way they need to act to be successful down the road, I mean, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do as a parent or a coach. So I think sometimes we let winning get in the way of that, and especially as high school coaches. I mean, man, we can never let that get in the way of doing the right thing for the kid. And maybe sometimes that's hard. That's sitting them for a game, or disciplining them. And hopefully that's a lesson that will steer them the right direction, that they won't have to learn that lesson again. So
that we didn't talk about this, but I'm interested to kind of hear how you feel. What is your policy, or what have you done over the years as far as something happens either in practice or at school or even outside of school where a player needs to be disciplined? And I think you hear all the time, sat him for a quarter, sat him for a half, didn't let him play a game. But there's a part of me that's always, what I don't like about that is I'm all for disciplining a player, but I don't like hurting the other 10 or 11. And so if this is a key part of our team, and so not playing him will definitely discipline him, but the other players are also put at a distinct disadvantage, or in a way they're being disciplined as well, but they didn't do anything. I've always been a little torn because I've done it before where it kept the guy out, or I've done it before where it's been an individual consequence, but it didn't affect playing time at all. What are your thoughts on which direction?
I think some of it depends on the severity of the incident. I think sometimes games are on the table just because, you know, of the severity of the incident or whatever happened. And coaching as long as I have, I mean, I've dealt with those situations. And you know, even, you know, whether it was just like kids going to the game having drank some alcohol, you know, that would be a situation where maybe, you know, being removed from the team for a time is necessary. Or, you know, where obviously the punishment of running, or I've even had kids have to stay and clean up the lunchroom, you know, after lunch, where they had to go around and clean up everybody's trash because, you know, kids aren't great at cleaning up their trash at lunch. I know that's shocking to everybody, but, you know, there's a lot of things you can do. I like to have kids sometimes serve, like have to do something serving wise like that, where they're having to, whether it's their classmates at school or, you know, cleaning up the trash in the cafeteria, whatever. But obviously the running, you know, sprints, things like that, I think are better alternative to sitting in games for something more minor, like being late to practice, or, you know, because like you said, it does punish the whole team, especially if that player's a critical part of the team in winning. I mean, and I think you have to be consistent there. So you can't sit one guy because he maybe doesn't have as big a role, and then just have the best player run. It's got to be consistent, and I think that doing that individual, you know, accountability, punishment, whatever you want to call it, is better than taking them out of the game. And I've always used this, you know, if it, let's take something like, I've dealt with this before with a couple players where they have a public display on the court, maybe being disrespectful towards a coach, myself, or an assistant, then I think that needs a public display of accountability. So in those situations, I have sat kids maybe the rest of the game and maybe even addressed it with some running or whatever later. But I think when it happens in front of the fans and in front of the parents and in front of the players, and it's all out in the open like that, that to hold everybody accountable, I think it needs to be done that way, because they won't ever know if you punish the kid, right? I mean, and that can create other issues.
Yeah.
And so I think that when I've had situations where there is some sort of public display in the middle of a game, that sometimes the game is the way it has to be dealt with because it happened in that setting.
I think that's a great point. And standards have to be held, and they have to be known by everybody in your program.
Yeah.
But then when they're broken, the consequences, I think it's wise to leave it up to the situation and give yourself room for grace in some situations, room to be super, you know, strong in others.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have your standards set, but then also your consequences set, then you might be forced to have to stick to something that you don't feel like is best. And I'm thinking back to, I thought Coach Thomas was really good with that. he had standards for us as players and things that we knew that we had to live by or try to live by. And my senior year, we're playing at Duncanville, and Bracy Wright, who was a phenomenal player, played in the NBA for years in Indiana. Him and another teammate got in some trouble before the game and missed the bus and weren't. So we start out this game. Duncanville had 5 Division I players, and we had a few, but we're missing Bracy. He was huge for us. He didn't play the first quarter, and he was being kind of punished for that. And it was during the second quarter. Coach and I laugh about it now, but I felt comfortable enough with him to go up and say, "Hey, Coach, I think Bracy's learned his lesson, and we need him." But because he didn't have a hard, fast rule, he could say, "Yeah, I think you're right." And Bracy came back out. We ended up beating. It was the best high school game I've ever been a part of. But the whole thing to say, like, it's wise to have these standards, but then give yourself room to make judgments based on that situation.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you definitely don't want to just have I think we do that with most things, right? We kind of weigh each situation, but I know there have been coaches that just have that set thing where you miss the bus, you don't play, or whatever. You're late to the bus, you don't play. And that's tough. I mean, because like you said, that could punish the whole team to some degree. So I think it's better to have that flexibility and to take each situation, as it comes.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.